moments where you feel kind of your insides are telling you one thing, but the external environment is trying to make sure that you think about something else, or that you accept information coming in from the external, but your insides are telling you something else. Some of us are having that experience. It could be small things, but it could be bigger things as well. So what we're going to talk about today is where are we right now? And where we are right now, and how we take information in and look at it and choose to be in relationship with it is going to impact what we co-create as our future, as individuals and as a collective. And there's nothing like having the opportunity to look at information with a group of people in a kind of a free-ranging conversation. So I do have some questions for you. We're going to take some informal polls, and David will put those questions into the chat. And if you respond, that's great. And I will be using your responses to kind of craft the next several webinars. So tonight we're going to focus on, I want to look at the role of the CDC. I want to look at the role of biomedical research. I want to look at the role of geopolitics. And I want to look at the role of where the United States is in such an interesting and precarious position as the leader of the free world. And why is that? Why is that? What are some of the dots that we can connect that might possibly explain why that is? So I have queued up 16 videos. A couple of them are quite long, but we'll share those links with you. If I can get in touch with you, I will make sure you have the link so that you can watch that information and look at it with fresh eyes. And I'll share with you what those are. Okay. So I think a lot of us are here now. It's wonderful. And thank you for coming, and thank you for choosing to spend your time this way. So first, I would like to unmute everyone, and let's just do a quick check, an affirmation and a check-in. And the approach I have is, may I be peaceful? May I be loving? May I be compassionate? And may my interactions be those of open-hearted intention, clarity, coherence, trust, truth, and transparency. So if we can all just kind of plug into that frequency for a little minute and be on that page together, I think it will serve us well. So thank you for doing that. Deep breath together, because boy, this is some kind of a wild amusement ride we're on. It's very serious and very strange. All right, so let's unmute people. If you're not obligated to speak or share, but if you care to, I would appreciate it. And I will let you know this is being recorded, and it will be shared again as a free replay on a number of other platforms I have, because I think it's time for us to start asking these more difficult questions and bigger questions in our communities. Okay, so I'm going to unmute folks. And I'm going to see if I can do that. You never know with Telegram. All right, so let me unmute you, and if I can unmute you, I'll let you know. How's that? And if you get a request to unmute, then go ahead and do that. Some people I can unmute, and some people I have to make the request. So strange. Okay, and if you don't want to, obviously you're going to stay muted. All right. If you would like to share, just, put a hand up. We can see you, and I can see most of you anyway. And just share with us where you are today, perhaps how this situation is affecting you, if it is, where you are. And what are you finding is one of the biggest changes and perhaps one of the biggest challenges for you right now. So anybody can start.
I can just riff off of just starting with the last thing you said, biggest changes, biggest challenges. I find myself in it's been an interesting, I've moved, I've landed, but the last 30 days I've been in a moving process, physically and on every other level also. And I'm just, I am no longer exhausted. I'm now just tired, and that's manageable. The biggest, it seemed almost normal, the whole moving process. The biggest change for me is having, and challenge, really, I think maybe both. This is the first thing that has come up, though, is the reactions of people. Sometimes people forget, and they start to, I'm friendly and they're friendly, and then all of a sudden, you have to stay over, or they're that way from the get-go. And some people manage it with humor and warmth, and others have allowed that attempt at separation within themselves and with others to take hold, and they're rigid, and it's very sad to me, and the place where I live is a more liberal place, but there are a surprising, under the liberal rock, or any label you want to have, but is a lot of fear. I'm noticing, because of the reactions to people on online platforms like Nextdoor Digest, who say something from their heart, and it's not the official narrative, and the responses are well over 99% negative, and maybe 50% of those or more derisive. Mm-hmm. And that's also been heartbreaking. Not heartbreaking, but it's really sad. And so, in coming out of this move and being, now just tired, and I've been feeling really, really good. I'm really in my right place, this new house. And I feel I'm still in my right place in Ashland. But coming out of that, and it's like waking up and stretching and not quite awake yet, the tired part. And then having something frequency-wise jarring, and having, and finding a way to adjust to that. Mm. So it's not like it's not like this huge deal. It's just an ongoing thing that keeps coming, coming up. And so my challenge is to continue to focus on myself, loving myself, and therefore being able to extend compassion, true compassion and love, to everyone else for whatever their choices are. It's almost like a new level of that for me.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I want to say we are going to follow along with the intention of this is I'm going to be directly looking at issues of income disparity and disparity in healthcare with regard to racial differences. And so I don't know, some of that may become difficult for some people here. I have no idea. But this is a time when we get to really ask deep, important questions about who we are and what kind of world we want to live in. So, Cynthia, I'm so excited for you that you are in a place where you feel safe and where things are manageable for you. And the challenge is one of um, attitudes that you're encountering. Be grateful for that it's just attitudes. Not that you wouldn't be, but I mean, I just think some of us are in very, very interesting positions where really what we're dealing with is not some of the really hardcore, difficult, really difficult things that some people are dealing with right now.
Yeah.
Okay,
I am grateful.
take a breath. Okay. Would anyone else like to jump in with an observation and a share? And really, change, the biggest change for you, and one of the greatest challenges. And maybe one of the nicest changes is something has come back to more normal than you thought it would sooner than you thought it would. Okay, who's next?
I can speak to that. It's real similar to Cynthia, really. And our biggest change was the move we had to make, or that we felt we needed to make. And I think it's this feeling of this pressure that's kind of always there, around how different things are. I find myself being really grateful for moments where I'm interacting with people and nobody's thinking about it. And it feels like, I guess now what normal, what I would have said normal was. And I think about that a lot. And it's strange. It's really strange.
Yeah, it's the compare and the contrasts are pretty interesting. All right, Kathleen, do you have anything you want to share? I know you were excited because you got to play golf again, which was really neat.
Yes, I did. I was talking to my best friend today, and I said, I think what I'm missing is not having total freedom, but I haven't really missed it because I have been enjoying my home. I've been getting things done that I've let go for a while. But just knowing that they took that one little piece away from me, kind of, it upsets me. I have done as much as I can to get out with other people. I have my mask. I walk 3 to 4 times a day with a friend of mine who does have an existing disease in her lungs. So I always have my mask on and we talk, but sometimes she's just so wrapped up that I have to cancel things as she talks because I don't want it inside me. So I do the 3 cancelings.
That's good.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to going out tomorrow and playing golf for at least 9 holes, and it's been okay. I just want to know that I can do whatever I want to do, even though I'm not really missing it. I do miss my family. I am usually down in Southern California for about 3.5 months a year, and I had to come home early. Like I was telling my friend, I said, I didn't get my quota of family and friends, and I'm really missing them right now.
Yeah.
With this change. But I do try to think very positive about things. I'm when I hear negative things on the TV, I'm canceling it out also. I just think we can move on if there's enough positive energy out there.
I think that's a wonderful way to hold space for yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. It's a wonderful way to hold space for yourself. And I think we've got to do that no matter what our circumstances. And I think we also, if we can, if we have enough energy, hold space for our friends, our children, our parents, our, however many people, we can just sort of softly carry that intention that I'm going to hold space in which we get to move forward in a way where we're not going to be irrevocably diminished.
Right.
Okay. Very important.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. All right, so
Felicia had a comment, and she's saying the biggest challenge she is facing is holding my space. While she is aware of other energies that she comes in contact with, and wanting to be certain that she acknowledges their presence, but at the same time dismissing the thing that does not serve her.
yeah, it's quite the balance. It's the razor's edge that many of us are walking on. Thank you for sharing that, Felicia. I have that challenge now. I'm living in my tiny weird world, and I live in a very beautiful place, and there's a beautiful garden, and I have great neighbors, and I'm incredibly fortunate. Amongst the neighbors, we have, everywhere you go, people are doing their little things. So we have two in the area of the garden. It's near my door. There are two tables. One is set up with 6 chairs, and one is my little cafe with a table with 2 chairs. And yesterday, my family, my son and his family, his wife and 2 kids came over, and everybody had their masks on, and we, got the chairs arranged so the social distancing was good, so my neighbors wouldn't freak out. But here's what I know. Some of you may not resonate with this. It's okay. This is what I know. I know that this bioweapon, that's what it is. This bioweapon is airborne. Okay? So there's there's a video that which will show you that there are people who say, like, they're doing the herd immunity thing in Sweden. Just, it doesn't make a difference. But I will really suggest to you that when you're dealing with a bioweapon that has been deliberately unleashed globally, we really need to think for ourselves out of the box and how we hold space for ourselves, because this is the situation that we're in. So one of the things that I will share is, whatever our attitude of positivity and appreciation for ourselves as conscious co-creators, and holding a really beautiful intention for people we don't even know, will never meet. Thank you very much for being that person. We are in a situation where, remember to wash your hands.
Yes.
Remember. Like, I have an old Amazon pouch. Something came in, and that's my designated throw the mail in there and spray it pouch. Mail comes, I pick it up, throw it in the pouch, spray it, leave it, and everything can wait a day or two. Wash your face. A lot of people are wearing the masks, and that's great. But I'm really going to share this with you. We have nanoparticles falling from the sky that contain this virus. So when you go out, wear your mask, but when you come in, wash your face, in addition to washing your hands. That's another step we have to do, but I really would like to share with you that it's a valuable step. And it's interesting because we're going to start the video shortly, but I had this virus in October, and I knew when I had it, I knew when I got it, I knew exactly. It was like with the AIDS, something in me turned like a key. I just knew. At that time, no, this was not out there as a thing. They were doing their test runs. And I happened to be someone who picked up the test runs. I'm not going to go into the reasons why that would happen for me, but I understood it, and I'm actually not upset about it. So wash your face, wash your hands. Remember to think about other people. I have a rule when I go to visit my 90-year-old mother. Before I go see her for 3 days, I'm anywhere. I don't go to the store. I don't interact with other people. And before I go to see her, I take a complete shower and watch everything, so that when I put on my mask and sit with her in her community room where she lives, I know that I haven't brought anything with me, because we are looking at about a 72-hour window for transmission. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If you are going to be interacting with vulnerable people, 2 hours, pay close attention, and take care of yourself and them in that way also. All right. So do you all have questions? Does anyone have any part of them that when I say that this virus is a bioweapon, they go, oh, absolutely impossible? Is there anybody here like that on this call? Raise your finger. I want to know. Because I'm glad you're here. Hey, so what is the history of how we got here to this bioweapon? There is a history, and it did begin with the AIDS virus. Who was targeted with the AIDS virus? Who was targeted were people who were considered not valuable in the least. Right?
Right.
Okay. Now, the CDC was involved with that. And so now I'm going to show you some videos of the CDC, and I'm going to connect a few dots. So what the CDC is doing then, what the CDC was doing then, what they're doing now. And when we listen to these videos, there's going to be one video that describes what the CDC did about the Ebola virus in West Africa. And I want you to listen very carefully to the language that they use. Very carefully. And the first video that we're going to watch is called The Road to Zero. Okay, now, David, do you want to pop that up, or should I risk it? David's gonna.
Happy to. I have it.
Okay, I have mine all queued up too, but you know this makes me nervous.
Terrifying, life-changing, rapid, unprecedented. It is impossible to pick one word to adequately describe the Ebola epidemic. From its origins in Guinea early in the year, the Ebola virus caught the world off guard, moving swiftly to neighboring Liberia and Sierra Leone, claiming thousands of lives and requiring a massive global response to help bring it under control.
When we activated the EOC on July 9th of 2014, it was a horrific situation. We knew that it was going to get much, much worse, faster than we could respond. And whatever we did, whatever we threw at the epidemic, we couldn't turn it around.
Early on, we tried to, stick to the core principles of what we knew, that it was contact tracing, it was case identification, it was educating people about disease and educating contacts to come to healthcare settings for diagnosis or treatment should they become ill.
We are following the ambulance you see ahead so that after these 2 cases are picked up, we can do some contact tracing.
Cases in West Africa escalated quickly, and Americans faced the harsh reality that infectious diseases are just a plane ride away.
Today, we are providing the information that an individual traveling from Liberia has been diagnosed with Ebola in the United States.
I remember looking at the results and thinking, this is, a very historical moment, the first imported case of Ebola in the United States.
In the fall of 2014, CDC set key programs into action. Airport officials began screening passengers from Ebola-affected countries, and those travelers were monitored for 21 days. Experts worked around the clock to help hospitals prepare to treat Ebola patients.
We have 5,000 hospitals in the United States, and so they're not all going to have the exact same personal protective equipment. So in the past, CDC would allow for some flexibility with regards to changes in local protocols. What we learned with Ebola is that we needed to be much more specific.
I knew that making this training really good could be an opportunity for us to regain some of the confidence that I feel like we had lost when those nurses got sick in Dallas. I could palpably feel the tension in the room begin to go away as I went through this talk and as we did this demonstration.
CDC sent their Ebola lab experts to Sierra Leone to help rapidly detect cases. This also lowered the chance of an infected patient showing up in the United States.
I think lab testing is critical in any outbreak response. It's very important to get the positive patients into a treatment center, but it's also just as important to get the negative patients out.
A major challenge was getting the cooperation from the West African community. People were afraid of Ebola and skeptical of the foreigners who had come to help.
We needed to understand what was driving the behaviors contributing to the outbreak, and then craft the right communication messages to change those behaviors, and then deliver them in a way that people could understand.
As we moved into 2015, there were signs of hope.
When you can actually see contacts being followed and patients being discharged as survivors from Ebola treatment units because they are coming in for early care, those are the things that you see that can actually give you some hope.
Ebola has been a devastating experience for many of us to see death so up close and personal, to see deaths that we couldn't prevent. We've made great progress, but we can't let down our guard. There will continue to be cases and clusters of Ebola, but an epidemic of the kind we've had for the past year never has to happen again.
Over. It is a word we can't use yet. The Ebola epidemic highlights the need for strong public health systems before outbreaks happen. CDC is establishing offices in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea to help them prevent future cases of Ebola and prepare for the next health crisis.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. Let's make sure we can be prepared for the next health crisis. Now, I mean, you can hear the language. I want you to pay very close attention to the language in all the videos that we're going to watch. And don't you love it how that one response was all about what happens so that it doesn't get to the United States, right? That was the relationship that was highlighted.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got what's going on over here, but our real goal is to make sure that it doesn't get to the United States. And then the whole conversation about PPE, what they learned, what they knew, when did they learn it, when did they know it?
Mhm.
This was 5 years ago. There are books, there are wonderful books out there. There are wonderful articles out there. As we go along in this webinar, we'll be sharing titles of books that you might want to, used to be able to get them from the library. Not so much. Oh. Kathleen, did you want to say something?
No, I'm just listening.
Okay.
I did want to say something I heard last week within a video. It was with Fauci. And he made, at one point, he made the statement about, it was in 2018 that he made the statement. And he said, he was talking about infectious diseases, and he said, and we are going to have one in the next couple of years. You can be sure of that.
Absolutely. Let no opportunity go wasted, right? So I want to go there, jump right into there. We're going to watch another video. David, thank you. Listen to the language. Crafting messages. Whoa.
Ebola was a devastating disease. The outbreak was unprecedented. Everyone felt like we had to do what we can do. Standing on the side and looking was not acceptable. I lived in Sierra Leone. I am from Sierra Leone, and I felt like I had to do my own little part to contribute to fighting Ebola. I mean, it was a huge task. There was no precedent for it. We had no examples to draw from. This was the first time ever that we had to change behaviors at that level for that period of time. No one wanted to die. A lot of times when we're going into a situation, we're going into a new country, we don't always really understand the culture. It is always very important for us to partner with the communities that we work with, be able to get the kind of information, the kind of support, the kind of buy-in and ownership that would be required for our programs to succeed. We also had to work with the traditional healers, especially. There are many ways that we're sharing what we've learned from Ebola.
Questions really started
from the CDC perspective. You have the CDC museum here, where a lot of people are coming and learning about different experiences. A lot of these are open access information that we're sharing with other people. You know, a lot of the materials and resources that we developed during the Ebola response are all available on CDC's website so that other people can learn from this experience. You need to identify some of the mistakes that were made. We can avoid these mistakes in the future if we learn from the past. I was one person working alongside many other people. The biggest takeaway that I got from the Ebola response is the importance of working as a team and doing your own part as if it means the world to you.
Listen to the language as if it means the world to you. The language is very carefully chosen, and it sounds very neutral and very benign. It is not. Right? Well, how do we get buy-in for our programs? Okay. All right, David, onward. Working? Okay. Thank you.
A new study by European scientists is raising questions about the origins of the deadly coronavirus. The study, which has yet to be peer-reviewed, was led by researchers from the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. The research suggests that the first outbreak of the virus may have gone undetected and happened as early as September 2019. That's 4 months before the first cases of a new mystery illness were reported to the World Health Organization at the end of December. Researchers also think the spread started south of the central Chinese city of Wuhan, which is where doctors first noticed the outbreak that has grown into a global pandemic. In an exclusive interview with the South China Morning Post, Peter Forster, a geneticist at Cambridge University, explained.
The virus may have mutated into its final human efficient form months ago, but stayed inside a bat or other animal, or even human, for several months without infecting other individuals. Then it started infecting and spreading among humans between September 13 and December 7.
So what's the science behind this hypothesis? The research team analyzed 1,001 strains of the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus, which causes COVID-19. The samples were collected from around the world. Using an algorithm called a phylogenetic network that can map the global movement of organisms through the mutation of their genes, the scientists were able to reconstruct what they theorize is the first significant spread of the virus. The data indicates that it may have happened 4 months earlier than the first recorded case of infection. But the team has not been able to pinpoint the first infected person, also known as patient zero. Scientists say finding that person could be crucial in understanding and ultimately controlling the pandemic. In an interview with The Post in February, Dr. Sarah Ballwine, an infectious disease expert at Hong Kong's Central Health Medical Practice, said,
"Figuring out who patient zero was wouldn't give us all the answers, but it would help to map the path the virus has taken and how it's traveling. It's hard to draw that map without knowing where it starts."
Identifying patient zero would allow doctors and health officials to trace that person's movements, find out who he or she infected, and in turn the people they infected, and so on. Every country or region that has been hit by the COVID-19 pandemic has its own patient zero, the first person to bring the coronavirus into the country. And some of them have been successfully identified. Patient zeros in Thailand, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, Singapore, Vietnam, the Philippines, and the United States had all been in Wuhan just before they became ill. In many instances, officials were able to isolate these patients and those who had immediate contact with them, and by doing that, they limited human-to-human transmission. But as more people were infected with the coronavirus and traveled internationally, the situation quickly went out of control because the sources of new infections were no longer linked to those patient zeros. Professor John Nichols, a pathologist at Hong Kong University, told The Post,
"There are so many outbreaks and hotspots around the world, and this virus appears to spread more rapidly than SARS, so it's going to be a big challenge to accurately pinpoint patient zero. Epidemiological resources would be better at mitigating the spread rather than looking back."
Professor Nichols was part of the expert team that pinpointed the origins of the SARS pandemic in 2002 and 2003. In that instance, patient zero was a 64-year-old medical professor from the Chinese city of Guangzhou who had infected at least 13 tourists staying at this hotel in Hong Kong. But far fewer people were infected by SARS than have been by COVID-19. And a search for the very first person in the world to be infected with the coronavirus that has caused this pandemic may be like looking for a genetic needle in a haystack of infections. So what did the Cambridge-led research team learn about the origins of this virus? They say their research shows that SARS-CoV-2 originated from bats. Genetic analysis found this is a 96% identical match to a coronavirus isolated by Chinese scientists from bat droppings in the southwestern province of Yunnan in 2013. But the remaining 4% of genes that differ are the results of hundreds of mutations, and it's unknown over what period of time those mutations took place. But because of the level of mutation, some scientists suspect the virus may have been spreading quietly in host animals and humans for years before it evolved into what it is today. But how reliable is the algorithm used by the Cambridge-led research to arrive at their theory about when the first COVID-19 outbreak started? Other scientists say the phylogenetic network has its limits. They say the accuracy of the time estimate is based on sample size and assumptions about how quickly the virus mutated. In a global pandemic like this, the virus could be mutating in unpredictable patterns. Sue Bing, a genetic researcher with the Kunming Institute of Zoology, told the Post,
"So it cannot be very precise. There's always a margin for error. This work may provide some important clues to future investigations, but the conclusions should be treated with caution."
The origins of the virus have also become a politically sensitive issue. US President Donald Trump has called it a Chinese virus, and 2 American news networks quoted unnamed sources in the American government saying the virus could have come from a virology institute in Wuhan. Meanwhile, Beijing has suggested a conspiracy theory saying the virus was made and introduced to China by US soldiers taking part in a sporting event in Wuhan. But the world's top life scientists have long dismissed these theories. They say all existing scientific evidence points to a natural origin. But where?
If I am pressed for an answer, I would say the original spread started more likely in southern China than in Wuhan. Proof can only come from analyzing more bats, possibly other potential host animals, and preserved tissue samples in Chinese hospitals stored between September and December. This kind of research project would help us understand how the transmission happened, and help us prevent similar instances in the future.
Ultimately, only more research can help scientists come closer to understanding what happened and pinpointing the mysterious origins of SARS-CoV-2.
All right, so in the Ebola outbreak, which they were hoping was going to be a global pandemic, in 2014, they were insisting that it would be a global pandemic by 2015. That was the predictive programming at that time, and some of you who've known me for a long time know what I did with that predictive programming with the help of other people. We flattened that curve, and we did it just being human with our own natural birthright attributes. We flattened the curve, and they didn't get their pandemic. All right, now ask yourself, what would be the benefit of a successful pandemic in Africa? What would be the benefit, and who would benefit? So that's a question you can tuck away. Ask yourself later, maybe do some of your own online research, right? But we know that Africa is the last continent that is absolutely ridiculously loaded with very valuable minerals and precious metals. It is the last frontier of the world where these resources have yet to be fully exploited. You know, wouldn't it be easier to exploit those resources with fewer people in the way?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next video.
Can I add to that for a second?
Absolutely.
In talking about sustainability and technology in some of my classes, like you look at what minerals are used in daily technology, laptops, phones, electronics in general. And around the world, most countries get 1, maybe 2 necessary resources mined out of that country, where China has like 8, 9, 10 of these critical resources all within their borders.
And the same is true for Africa.
Right? You look at the whole continent and it's all there. It's all
Right.
buried there.
Right. Hey, nice video. Oh dear.
Congress has appropriated roughly $175 billion so far to help hospitals and other healthcare providers weather the consequences of this COVID pandemic. But some hospitals are struggling to keep up, and racial disparities in the American healthcare system are magnifying the problem. William Brangham is back with our latest conversation he recorded earlier from the front lines of this crisis.
We go now to the city of Chicago, a city that's dealing with its own rising outbreak. And one small hospital on the city's south side, Roseland Community Hospital, and how it is struggling to keep up. The front page story in the Chicago Tribune recently said it all: outgunned, outmanned, and underfunded. I'm joined now by Roseland's president and CEO, Tim Egan, and by the manager of its emergency room, Lynette Houston. Thank you both very much for being here. Tim Egan, to you first. For those of us who can't see inside your hospital and see what you all see every single day, can you just give us a picture of what it's like in there now?
Well, our emergency department has been overrun. We have 19 bays in our ED, and right now you can find gurneys at the nurses station, patients being treated right in the middle of the hallways. The demand for our service has been overwhelming, but we've been meeting that demand. And it's why we say it's a bright hope during dark chaos. We're giving people a chance to recover from this disease. We're giving the best treatment possible, and I just can't commend our staff enough. Folks like Lynette, our doctors, our EVS, everyone is stepping to the front lines and delivering the care that people need.
And Tim, staying with you for a second, could you just give us a sense of who your patient population is?
Well, the New Roseland Hospital is on the far south side of the city of Chicago. We're the last hospital within the city limits on the far south side. We're in the greater Roseland community, and 96% of our residents are African American, and over 87% of our patients are Medicaid patients.
And Lynette, the same question to you as I asked Tim. We can't see inside your emergency room or your ICU. Can you give us a snapshot of what it's like, the kinds of patients that you're seeing there?
The kind of patients that we're seeing here is patients who coming in suspecting that they've been infected by the virus. We have a 19-bed ER where we have other rooms where we can improvise and put those patients there, which would come up to like 22 beds. But we're also using beds around the nurses station where we can put at least 8 beds around the nurses station. These people are coming in and they're sick. They're sick. I know the news say stay home and try to take care of yourself at home, but these are people who use the emergency room as their primary physician because a lot of people in this area don't have their own primary. So the emergency room is their primary doctor where they come here for services.
We hear, Tim, a lot of these, that Congress is passing billions of dollars out to the states and to businesses to try to keep them afloat. Are you getting help from the state to help offset some of these costs that you're incurring?
So we've seen some federal aid that came from the Payroll Protection Program, but we're seeking many more grants. We need more support. We've tested 10,000 folks who've come down to our hospital for COVID-19 testing. You know, the Roseland community is 7% of the population of the city of Chicago, and right now we're 16% of the COVID-19 deaths. That showcases the disparity in the funding of healthcare that has happened over decades in the city of Chicago. While I've seen Medicaid dollars flood out to resources in the suburbs, to multi-billion-dollar corporations, hospitals like Roseland have been underfunded. You know, when I said on the front page of Chicago Tribune, we were outgunned, outmanned, and underfunded, I meant it. We don't have the resources. We don't have a reserve of funding that we can use to buy new equipment and hire more staff. And that's because of this woeful lack of funding that we've received over many, many years.
Lynette Houston, Tim is describing a situation that sounds like a terrible circumstance for the staff that has to work in and day out. I mean, obviously, the stress of this kind of work in a contagious environment where people are worried, obviously, about themselves getting infected, and yet it sounds like you're having to work incredibly long hours just to meet this demand. How is everybody holding up?
My staff is really tremendous. I take my hat off to them because it's really, it could be sometimes overwhelming, but sometimes we go into chats where we try to laugh. We try to, not look at the the other side of it, which is the dark side, because sometimes we do lose people. You know, the numbers of the deaths is rising, and it has happened here also, and those families cannot be with their loved ones. So it doesn't make our day easy, but we have to keep moving forward. We have to keep fighting, and my nurses are really tremendous. The ICU nurses are really tremendous.
It certainly sounds like it. Lynette, I understand you haven't had a chance to see as much of your family personally as you would like to.
I haven't. I don't, I don't. My daughter doesn't live here, but I normally go see them every weekend. I don't go because I don't want to go around them right now.
Because you're worried about infection.
Yes, but it's not only me, it's my whole staff. I have one employee that lives in the garage now. I have one employee moved out of her house because she didn't want to be around her mom who is sick, who has a condition where it's compromised, so she don't want to be. So it's not only me, it's the sacrifice that we make, and it's a whole group effort. So no, we haven't seen our families.
Tim Egan, you said that you have been complaining about the underfunding of hospitals like yours for years, even before the pandemic. Do you think that this crisis will actually be the thing that finally wakes people up to the importance of community hospitals, to rural hospitals, to small health centers like yours?
I'm praying to God that it is. The number of deaths in the African American community due to COVID-19 is a call for hope, a desperate call for hope, that we finally get the decision makers to realize that communities like Roseland deserve an investment in the healthcare services. These folks are dying because they have comorbidities. Folks are dying because they have quadmorbidities. That's because we don't have the ability to treat folks when at their earliest onset of diseases like asthma, COPD, heart disease, obesity. We need funding for programs, for primary care programs, for outreach to these folks to get them on a path of wellness and overall health. And without funding that is absolutely available, we won't be able to do that. And you'll just see more disparity in the deaths in the African American community without that desperately needed funding.
Tim Egan and Lynette Houston of Roseland Hospital on the south side of Chicago, thank you both very, very much for talking with us, and good luck with all of your work out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And one other note, this is National Nurses Week. We want to give a special thanks.
Okay, so let's just kind of roll back, and we get a description of the community dilemma happening in Chicago with a predominantly impacting African Americans. And then we hear Mr. Egan speaking about programs being underfunded to deal with people before they move into that comorbidity sector of society. And we also hear that the majority of who is being cared for in these settings are people who do not have private insurance. They do not have physician's care. Many of them may not even have employment that would pay for having your own, purchasing your own health care if your company does not provide that for you. But the request for money, it's interesting because one of the things that we'll get into in a subsequent webinar, we'll talk about the food industry. We'll be talking about GMOs, and we'll be talking about how genetically modified organisms and the sugar industry and the junk food industry and now the vaping industry have all contributed to this train wreck. Okay, so just hang on to that because that's coming, later on. But we have to connect the big dots, and we cannot leave food or the lack of good, nutritious food that has not been chemically altered or genetically altered. We cannot have an intelligent conversation without connecting that dot. At least I don't think we can. Okay, David, let's carry on. Thank you so much.
Just that, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp announced today that some businesses will reopen as early as this Friday. Take a listen to what he had to say at a press conference earlier today.
Today, we are announcing plans to incrementally and safely reopen sectors of our economy. Given the favorable data, enhanced testing, and approval of our healthcare professionals, we will allow gyms, fitness centers, bowling alleys, body art studios, barbers, cosmetologists, hair designers, nail care artists, estheticians, their respective schools, and massage therapists to reopen their doors this Friday, April the 24th.
And as that announcement was made, there are still 19,000 coronavirus cases across that state. Keisha Lance Bottoms, mayor of Atlanta, Georgia, joins us now for more on what she plans to do as the leader of the state's most populous city in response to the governor. Mayor, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Lindsay.
It took a considerable amount of time for Governor Kemp to issue a stay-at-home order for Georgia. Of course, you had issued the same guidelines for the city of Atlanta weeks before he took action. So do you now plan to keep Atlanta locked down despite the governor's order for some businesses to open as early as this week?
Well, Lindsay, that's what we're having our attorneys look at now. It appears that the governor's order supersedes anything that I can do as mayor, but I certainly still have my voice that I can use. And what I will continue to ask Atlantans is to please stay at home. I have a great deal of respect and regard for the governor. We work very well together. I'm not sure what data the governor is referencing in helping him make this decision. I've not spoken with him. I talked with the mayor of the second most populated city in Georgia, Mayor Davis in Augusta. He's not spoken with him. So we don't know what the governor is looking at, but what I do know is that we had nearly 19,000 people who tested positive as of this evening. We also have had an increase of 13.8% in deaths as of this evening. So the best description I received was from Dr. Carlos Del Rio, one of the infectious disease experts at Emory University. He said it's like climbing Mount Everest. And just because you make it to the top doesn't mean that you can't die on your way down. And there also may be other peaks that we may have in this state. So I am extremely concerned about the announcement the governor made. I hope that he's right and I'm wrong, because if he's wrong, then more people will die.
Well, you all have access to the same numbers, the same statistics. Why wouldn't you be on the same page? And did he give you a heads up? You all have not had any communication in advance of him making today's announcement?
Well, again, the governor and I communicate regularly, and so he did not communicate with me on this, and that, of course, was his prerogative as he is the governor of this state, but we did not communicate. It's very clear that our thoughts on where we are with deaths and the people who are testing positive and our testing capabilities are not aligned. I would say, to the extent that we've had any good news in Atlanta, it's because we were very aggressive in this city. With a metropolitan area of nearly 6 million people, we've had less than half the cases in the state with more than half of the population. But that's because we've been aggressive. One of the biggest hot spots we are seeing in the state, I understand, is in Bibb County, near Macon, Georgia, where they didn't shut anything down. And so, again, I hope that the governor is right about this, but I am certainly concerned.
I just want to circle back one last time on this. Just last week, you said, I think the biggest mistake that we can make is to be so eager to get things back to normal that we put people's lives in jeopardy. Are you concerned that the governor's plan to allow the shelter-in-place order in Georgia to expire in just 10 days might do just that and put people's lives in jeopardy?
Lindsay, we have to live to fight another day. And I understand it is extremely concerning when people don't know how they will eat and how they will pay their bills. But these are concerns that you have when you are amongst the living. And if we don't continue to distance ourselves, if we don't heed what we've seen happen in other cities, our population will be at risk. Our biggest outbreak in the state came from 2 funerals, by and large, in Albany, Georgia. And so for us to go back to opening up houses of worship just seems a bit premature to me.
Atlanta, of course, has a large African-American population with underlying conditions. You said some of the highest asthma rates in the country as well. We know that you've created an advisory council to reopen Atlanta. What's your timeline for reopening, and what's the criteria for doing so?
Well, this is why I created an advisory council. I think that it's something that we need input from a cross-sector of people, from people who do business in the city, but also from our health experts. And so I don't have a timeline. My timeline will be based upon what the scientific data says. And if the data says we can open back up, we will open back up. But if the data says it's too soon, then it's nothing that I, as mayor in good conscience, can be in a rush to do. I think where we can expend our energy is to look at ways that we can alleviate some of the hardships for our communities. We've done it through small business loan funds. We aren't disconnecting water service in the city. We are standing up a loan fund specifically for beauties and barber shops. And so I think that we need to continue to be thoughtful in providing ways for people to feel comfortable staying at home. But I think to rush to open back up our state could cost us lives.
And lastly, the Kaiser Family Foundation founded a study released last week. That Georgia ranks low as far as the number of citizens who've been tested. Do you think that increasing the number of people tested is part of the key to reopening?
It absolutely is key, because in this state, as I sit here now, we still are not testing people who are asymptomatic or people even with mild symptoms. And so until we can broadly test everyone who I believe has been in contact with someone who is tested positive or has reason to believe that they have been exposed, I think that we will all be at risk. And again, I can't supersede the governor's order. The governor is the governor, and I respect his position and have enjoyed a close working relationship with him. But I certainly cannot in good conscience say that I agree with his order, and I will continue to use my voice as mayor of Atlanta to ask people to continue to stay home, follow the science, and exercise common sense.
Mayor, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate your time.
Okay, so we've been at this an hour. We have more to go, but we might want to take a bit of a break. Yeah? Come back in 5 minutes, and we're going to next take a look at what the CDC is doing in Atlanta. I hope this isn't, people are not going to leave here depressed. I got to make sure people are like, we can really have some amazing choices ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to look at all this information if I didn't feel like there was a path for recourse. Like, I went down the rabbit hole when I was much younger, and definitely hit that wall. Like, there's all of this information about what's actually happening, and there's no viable answer to really address it as an individual or as a group. You hear about people coming together as a group and then it fizzles out or is taken over or people just disappear or whatever. But it's so nice to have an actual path individually and as a group that can make effective change. It's really empowering.
And I think that's part of, I mean, it's a small pebble in the ocean, but I do feel that letting people know that there is a path, that there is a possibility to find the third way in all of this is helpful. And it's not even about hope. It's about the practical insight into just how amazing human beings are and how much we're capable of when we're not shut down and weaponized and elected and on and on and on and on. So we will have, we will leave on an uplifting note, because I'm one of the happiest people I know. And I think that my happiness has grown in algorithmic relationship to how much I am willing to see things as they are and to take a walk through the dark park. Yeah. It's a lot, but we're grown up now. We're grown ups. We're grown ups.
Yes.
I love having a multi-generational group, because those of us who have some institutional memory and personal experience have the opportunity to make sure that information gets shared with younger people. I think it's important. So yeah, I'm a retired warrior. I'm an armchair warrior now. But when I was 15, I was on the front steps of the Pentagon during the biggest protest in the United States against the war of Vietnam. I was sitting on the steps looking at a guy with a rifle standing right in front of me. I fought my way through tear gas to get there. People were running the other way, and what did I say? Oh, here's my opportunity.
I remember seeing all those riots.
Yeah, me too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Such a bad war.
No, it was a bad thing. And people coming out in those kinds of numbers and saying, really did turn the tide for a minute.
Well, wasn't Johnson playing chess with us?
Yes.
So,
like I said, for a minute, for a quick minute.
Yeah.
But they do respond. They cannot not respond with that kind of pressure. And I think it's another reason I want to have these conversations, because when I listen to the mayor of Atlanta talking about how she's not on the same page with the governor and there was no communication, that's incredible. And when I listen to the governor, then please note symbolically, standing behind the governor, did you see yes, I guess he was probably what you call reservist, right? Tall, black, reservist, black man in his uniform holding the sign.
Yes.
Okay. Like they couldn't find somebody else. Obviously not. Okay. These are the details that I actually really enjoy catching. Okay, so now the next video is, and maybe we'll wait a few more minutes. The next video, I don't know, people may have just bailed by there. I can't take anymore. I don't know. The next video is going to look at what the CDC is doing in Atlanta, and then we're going to have a conversation about what that means, because we've connected some very big dots, and now we can drill in on what does this all mean for us personally when it comes to the choices that we're going to make and the conversations we're going to have with other people. Okay, does anybody need to come back in? I think everybody's okay. All right, David, on your couch.
There we go.
Right.
The current Ebola outbreak is the largest Ebola outbreak in history and the first ever in West Africa. At CDC, our mission is to prevent, detect, and stop disease outbreaks wherever they occur. And that's why CDC disease detectives are hard at work 24/7 in West Africa.
Hi, Greg here. I'm with Ishmael, and we're going out with our UN colleagues to train contact tracers.
In the fight against Ebola, one of the most important tools we have to prevent spread is contact tracing. In fact, it is the key to stopping the outbreak and saving lives.
She wanted to know how we are going on, anybody who has been sick, anybody who has been in hospital.
Contact tracing means finding everyone who comes in direct contact with a sick Ebola patient. We ask the Ebola patient or their family who the patient had contact with since they started their symptoms. These contacts are then found and watched for symptoms of sickness for 21 days to see if they become ill. If a contact begins to show symptoms of Ebola, he is immediately isolated, tested, and provided care, and the cycle starts again. All of the new patient's contacts must be found and watched for symptoms of sickness for 21 days to see if they become ill. The process is repeated until there are no new patients.
That's how we're going to stop the transmission chain of Ebola.
Contact tracing identifies new Ebola cases quickly, so they can be isolated as soon as they show symptoms, preventing spread to others. In the event someone with Ebola travels to another country, we would use contact tracing there as well. The truth is, even one missed contact can keep the outbreak going. But by carefully tracing all contacts and isolating new cases as soon as they develop symptoms, we can prevent further spread. By working together, CDC and its partners will stop the outbreak and save lives from this devastating disease.
Okay, roll right into the next one. Yeah, I know, really, I know.
We have a good friend of ours here in Ashland who is a contact tracer.
Oh.
It's not his job, but it's one of his job requirements now.
Yes, you bet. Okay.
It's going to take a second to the next video.
Thank you, David. Yeah,
My
a
pleasure.
lot of people will be doing this job along with collecting census forms or making census stops. And I think it's interesting. We had a very high profile national political movement, and then we have the census rolling out right after that. And then after the census rolling out, then we have the pandemic. Woo!
Yeah, he's county tax assessor, so he goes into different homes. And
yes, ask that question.
has to ask that question
About all the contacts they've made.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
Door to door in Metro Atlanta to see if people have antibodies for the virus. Some saying they are afraid to let those medical workers inside their homes, and only CBS 46 was there. Our Jamie Kennedy spoke to one of the people who were tested today. Jamie, you're in DeKalb County. That's where some of those crews were.
Sean, the CDC were hitting the pavement tonight here in Candler Park, where the neighbourhood was happy to welcome them in, but many online saying they wouldn't have a bar of it. Homeowners in Fulton and DeKalb counties greeted by CDC officials surveying the community.
We're working with the Georgia Department of Public Health and the DeKalb Department of Public Health to do a seroprevalence survey around the community in DeKalb County to determine the community transmission for coronavirus.
Officials randomly selecting houses and drawing blood for antibodies and conducting a questionnaire to better understand the deadly virus's spread. Jordan Bear was one of the first to be tested.
Normally wouldn't have opened the door, but I looked outside and saw some folks in some PPE gear. One of them had a clipboard with CDC visible on it.
If you had not read online what they were here for, do you think you would have opened the door?
Probably not.
Many online have criticised the survey, saying people are meant to be sheltering in place and limiting contact with others, not going door to door.
You know, if they'd said, hey, yeah, you guys are number 7 of 7, I'm going to be a lot more reluctant to have them anywhere near me. But because we were number 1 and they were in full gear, I felt okay with it.
Alpharetta Police Department posted about the testing, saying there is not a definitive answer as to what a positive or negative antibody test means. Jordan says the family's test experience was great and they were happy to do it.
It wasn't anything intrusive. It wasn't anything that we were uncomfortable sharing.
Like the CDC showing up and getting information could lead to a cure.
You're for wellness.
Now the questionnaire given to
Okay, all right. So I want to show this because one of my aims in doing these webinars is we have to think about what our responses are going to be. And we can't really be clear about all that unless we have lots of information. So one of the things that I'd like everybody watching this webinar to know at any point that you're watching it now and in the future is that every time your blood is drawn, you lose that information. That information becomes the property of whoever takes the blood. And they then have the right to do whatever they want to with that blood, and they have no obligation to tell you about any of it. So when we're looking at, there are a couple of dots I want to connect. Like, isn't it interesting that this SARS-2, coronavirus 2, the SARS-2, is something that seems to be aligned with bats. And the Ebola virus was also something that was supposedly aligned with bushmeat, whatever that is, okay? Wild creatures. Bats are bloodsuckers. They suck, that's how they live. So it's interesting to me, and further down the line, we have a video from a doctor who explains how this particular, as people are asking different questions, a number of doctors began to realize that what they thought they were finding in their patients, they weren't dying of pneumonia, they were dying of blood clots in the lung. And as they did more research, what has been initially discovered is that the RNA of this virus has the capacity to, in a sense, track and trace blood-rich vessels in the body, and to then bore through endothelial cells, which perform the outer membrane layers that protect those blood vessels. So this virus is functioning like a bat. It is going after the blood in a person's body. And the lungs, as you can imagine, is not only oxygen rich, but it's incredibly densely packed with blood vessels. Let me just keep it simple. And the body's inflammatory response is to generate clots. When, if you get cut, if you cut your finger, what does your finger do? It clots. It clots. So just imagine what it would be like to have your body invaded by this kind of an organism that is going after every blood vessel in your lungs that it can get a hold of, and your body is freaking out, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to stop the invasion. So we're going to talk about that in upcoming videos, and we're going to talk about the nature of that inflammatory response, and we're also going to talk about immune systems that have become confused because of vaccines. But that's a spoiler. Okay, next next video, David. Thank you.
1930s, Albert Einstein was upset with quantum mechanics. He proposed a thought experiment where, according to the theory, an event at one point in the universe could instantaneously affect another event arbitrarily far away. He called this spooky action at a distance because he thought it was absurd. It seemed to imply faster-than-light communication, something his theory of relativity ruled out. But nowadays, we can do this experiment, and what we find is indeed spooky. But in order to understand it, we must first understand spin. All fundamental particles have a property called spin. No, they're not actually spinning, but the analogy is appropriate. They have angular momentum and they have an orientation in space. Now, we can measure the spin of a particle, but we have to choose the direction in which to measure it. And this measurement can have only one of two outcomes. Either the particle's spin is aligned with the direction of measurement, which we'll call spin up, or it is opposite the measurement, which we'll call spin down. Now, what happens if the particle's spin is vertical, but we measure its spin horizontally? Well, then, it has a 50% chance of being spin up and a 50% chance of being spin down. And after the measurement, the particle maintains this spin. So measuring its spin actually changes the spin of the particle. What if we measure spin at an angle 60 degrees from the vertical? Well, now, since the spin of the particle is more aligned to this measurement, it will be spin up 3/4 of the time and spin down 1/4 of the time. The probability depends on the square of the cosine of half the angle. Now, an experiment like the one Einstein proposed can be performed using 2 of these particles, but they must be prepared in a particular way. For example, formed spontaneously out of energy. Now, since the total angular momentum of the universe must stay constant, you know that if one particle is measured to have spin up, the other, measured in the same direction, must have spin down. I should point out it's only if the 2 particles are measured in the same direction that their spins must be opposite. Now, here's where things start to get a little weird. You might imagine that each particle is created with a definite, well-defined spin. But that won't work, and here's why. Imagine their spins were vertical and opposite. Now, if they're both measured in the horizontal direction, each one has a 50-50 chance of being spin up. So there's actually a 50% chance that both measurements will yield the same spin outcome. And this would violate the law of conservation of angular momentum. According to quantum mechanics, these particles don't have a well-defined spin at all. They are entangled, which means their spin is simply opposite that of the other particle. So when one particle is measured and its spin determined, you immediately know what the same measurement of the other particle will be. This has been rigorously and repeatedly tested experimentally. It doesn't matter at which angle the detectors are set or how far apart they are, they always measure opposite spins. Now just stop for a minute and think about how crazy this is. Both particles have undefined spins, and then you measure one, and immediately you know the spin of the other particle, which could be light years away. It's as though the choice of the first measurement has influenced the result of the second faster than the speed of light, which is indeed how some theorists interpret the result. But not Einstein. Einstein was really bothered by this. He preferred an alternate explanation, that all along the particles contained hidden information about which spin they would have if measured in any direction. It's just that we didn't know this information until we measured them. Now, since that information was within the particles from the moment they formed at the same point in space, no signal would ever have to travel between the 2 particles faster than light. Now, for a time, scientists accepted this view, that there were just some things about the particles we couldn't know before we measured them. But then along came John Bell with a way to test this idea. This experiment can determine whether the particles contain hidden information all along or not. And this is how it works. There are 2 spin detectors, each capable of measuring spin in one of 3 directions. These measurement directions will be selected randomly and independent of each other. Now, pairs of entangled particles will be sent to the 2 detectors, and we record whether the measured spins are the same, both up or both down, or different. We'll repeat this procedure over and over, randomly varying those measurement directions, to find the percentage of the time the 2 detectors give different results. And this is the key, because that percentage depends on whether the particles contain hidden information all along or if they don't. Now, to see why this is the case, let's calculate the expected frequency of different readings if the particles do contain hidden information. Now, you can think of this hidden information like a secret plan the particles agree to, and the only criterion that plan must satisfy is that if the particles are ever measured in the same direction, they must give opposite spins. So, for example, one plan could be that one particle will give spin up for every measurement direction, and its pair would give spin down for every measurement direction. Or another plan, plan 2, could be that one particle could give spin up for the first direction, spin down for the second direction, and spin up for the third direction. Whereas its partner would give spin down for the first direction, spin up for the second direction, and spin down for the third direction. All other plans are mathematically equivalent, so we can work out the expected frequency of different results using these 2 plans. Here, I'm visually representing the particles by their plans, their hidden information. With plan 1, the results will obviously be different 100% of the time. It doesn't matter which measurement directions are selected. But it does for particles using the second plan. For example, if both detectors measure in the first direction, particle A gives spin up while particle B gives spin down. The results are different. But if instead detector B measured in the second direction, the result would be spin up, so the spins are the same. We can continue doing this for all the possible measurement combinations, and what we find is the results are different 5 out of 9 times. So using the second plan, the results should be different 5/9 of the time. And using the first plan, the results should be different 100% of the time. So overall, if the particles contain hidden information, you should see different results more than 5/9 of the time. So what do we actually see in experiment? Well, the results are different only 50% of the time. It doesn't work. So the experiment rules out the idea that all along these particles contain hidden information about which spin they will give in the different directions. So how does quantum mechanics account for this result? Well, let's imagine detector A measures spin in the first direction and the result is spin up. Now immediately you know that the other particle is spin down if measured in the first direction, which should happen randomly 1/3 of the time. However, if particle B is measured in one of the other 2 directions, it makes an angle of 60 degrees with these measurement directions. And recall from the beginning of this video, the resulting measurement should be spin up 3/4 of the time. Since these measurement directions will be randomly selected 2/3 of the time, particle B will give spin up 2/3 times 3/4 equals half of the time. So both detectors should give the same results half of the time and different results half of the time, which is exactly what we see in the experiment. So quantum mechanics works, but there is debate over how to interpret these results. Some physicists see them as evidence that there is no hidden information in quantum particles, and it only makes sense to talk about spins once they've been measured. Whereas other physicists believe that entangled particles can signal each other faster than light to update their hidden information when one is measured. So does this mean that we can use entangled particles to communicate faster than light? Well, everyone agrees that we can't. And that is because the results that you find at either detector are random. It doesn't matter which measurement direction you select or what's happening at the other detector, there's a 50-50 probability of obtaining spin up or spin down. Only if these observers later met up and compared notebooks would they realize that when they selected the same direction, they always got opposite spins. Both sets of data would be random, just the opposite random from the other observer. That is indeed spooky, but it doesn't allow for the communication, the sending of information from one point to another faster than light. So it doesn't violate the theory of relativity. And that, at the very least, would make Einstein happy.
Okay, I had to throw that in. Just because we're being hopeful, and just because when we understand who we really are and how we function at that level, that's when we have choice. Okay. Does anybody ever just a little levity, just a little?
I love that guy, Veritasium. That guy does some great videos.
Isn't that a beautiful video? And it's so aligned with what we're learning in our course about particle spin and angle of rotation of particle spin. And in this demo, he's only working with 60 degrees, but you could see the correlations. And you can also understand that that little bit that they call hidden information is source. And it is Manu energy. And while it appears to be neutral, it does help make the decision of whether it's going to be an up day or a down day. Okay. I took a video of it today. Because when I woke up, you know, I shared my email, right? We have the weather pattern. And today was supposed to be a smear day. And I got up and it was, you know, it was iffy. And then I got up again and I looked down and over to on the right side, you know, organic Gaia was trying to keep it clear. And on the left side, the smear was setting in. And I stood there and I opened my neighbors, just they're so great. Opened my door and I said, "Hey, air elementals, come on, you gotta fight. You gotta put up a fight. Come on. What is this? Right? Come on, team, let's go. You can't let the gloom penetrate you. You have to penetrate the gloom. Come on. So I'm standing at the doorway. Come on, you can do it. 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 An hour later, I went out and looked again, exactly on my property, looking across the garden. To the left, half smear. To the right, half clear. Right over the rooftop of my neighbor's house, we had 50% up and 50% down. And what was the deciding influence on that situation? C'est moi. Right?
Mm-hmm.
When we learn how to be in relationship like this, down to the level of our quanta, it's all good. Okay. All right. Now let's have another depressing video.
No.
I want you to compare and contrast now. Come on, people.
And here's something else that's making news in the US, the arrest of a Harvard professor, one who headed the chemistry and chemical biology department in Harvard, who helped set up a lab in Wuhan, who was working with the Chinese, was being funded by the Chinese while also getting money from the US Department of Defense. This is enough raw material for social media special agents to join the dots. Is this Harvard professor linked to the coronavirus outbreak? Our next report has the answer.
Separate cases highlighting the ongoing threat posed by Chinese economic espionage and research theft in the United States.
This video has gone viral.
Home of 60-year-old Dr. Charles Lieber today.
It claims that the United States has found the man who made and sold the deadly coronavirus to China.
University in Wuhan, and was paid up to $50,000 per month.
Dr. Charles Lieber, a Harvard professor who is now being called the coronavirus culprit. The viral video claims that Dr. Lieber was arrested on the 5th of April. But, like much else on social media, this is fake news. The video is old. The claims are wrong. Gravitas carried the original arrest report on the 29th of January.
The arrest of a Harvard professor and 2 Chinese researchers in the US comes at a critical time. Could this snowball into a bigger clash? Here's a Gravitas special report.
He's being called a Chinese spy. US prosecutors have arrested him on charges of economic espionage and research theft.
The arrest today of a Harvard University professor for lying about his participation in a Chinese foreign recruitment program.
So who is Dr. Lieber and what is his story? Dr. Charles Lieber is a nanoscientist. He develops small materials on the nanometer scale, not viruses. He is the chair of Harvard University's Chemistry and Chemical Biology Department and has been affiliated with the university since 1991. So has Dr. Lieber been arrested? Yes, he was arrested in January this year. Again, not on the 5th of April. So why was the Harvard professor arrested? Well, he was being funded by the Chinese. He hid this fact while drawing funds from the US government. Dr. Lieber has been charged with aiding China. So does his arrest have anything to do with the coronavirus? The answer is no. Dr. Charles Lieber's case is one of financial conflict of interest. What is the Thousands Talent Plans? At the center of it is China's Thousands Talent Plans. This program encourages foreign experts to bring their knowledge to China. It also rewards individuals for stealing proprietary information. Dr. Lieber was part of this program between 2012 and 2017. But Harvard did not know about this. China paid Lieber $50,000 per month for 3 years. He also received living expenses of $158,000. Dr. Lieber also worked with the Wuhan University of Technology. He was awarded $1.5 million for establishing a lab in Wuhan. The professor did not disclose any of this. To top this, Lieber continued receiving grants from the US Department of Defense. That's where the conflict comes in. Is there anything wrong with Lieber working with China? Technically, no, but he should have disclosed these affiliations to Harvard and US agencies. Instead, Lieber lied about them on 2 occasions in 2018 and 19. Hence, he was arrested. Nothing to do with creating or selling the coronavirus. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Do not look at my left hand. Do not look.
Yeah.
Look at my right hand. Do not look at my left hand. So Dr. Lieber's specialty is nanoparticles. His interest, let's say his possible affiliation with where we are with the coronavirus, is bringing those elements, nanoparticles and virus together for dissemination from airplanes and God knows what else. Okay. So, this is how it goes. This is what they do. So I thought that was another light moment, and I think there's one more. We could probably skip the next one. They asked for $1 million on bail for this guy, and he, like that, not a problem. I have to keep my sense of humor. He helped to put together the Wuhan Research Laboratory. Okay, next video. If it's about Dr. Lieber, we can skip it. I think we could all, our brain cells could all be working independently around that. Okay, $15 million from the government, but hey, we can have a living wage for people who. Okie dokie. All right, we can skip this one. We can go this one, I think. I might have
is
doubled up.
raising questions about the origins of the deadly corona.
Yeah, it was here earlier, much earlier. And interestingly, the day that I saw the dead chickadee, and the next day I got sick, and we have, usually in our neighborhood, we have lots and lots of chickadees. It's a very common bird where I live, very lovely visitor to the garden. No chickadees in sight this spring.
Oh.
Who knows? Okay, David, what do we got next? What number are we at?
Number 12, I think. Dr. Erickson's talking about minimal impact of lockdowns.
Okay, let's skip that. And then there's another really long video from a doctor who's talking about what the doctors who are looking at COVID patients, who are actually working with them, what they are discovering. We're going to send you all the links so you can look at these videos, you can share them with people, you can start your own conversations. So let's go to what's next? What do we got?
There's White House taking more steps to stop coronavirus spread in the West Wing. Deadline.
I think we all know about that, right? They're getting tested every 5 minutes, but the rest of the country, well, okay.
Then there's the We Were There Ebola video recording of September 5th. We Were There lecture detailing CDC response.
This is one that you should watch on your own. Very important, very good information. It's a longer one. Okay, now then I think we have one more of a doctor.
Yeah, number 15 is the 1918 pandemic partner webinar video commemorating 100 years.
Oh, isn't it nice? In 20, CDC had to throw a party for 100 years of a global pandemic.
Oh,
They
right.
killed millions of people. 100 years. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Okay, then I think there's one more after that.
No, that's number 15. I don't have a. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Then we're back to the road to zero is the last.
No, okay,
last-
well, let me do one then. Let me see if I can find
Okay.
it.
Oh, there's number 16, your doctor, but
Yes.
maybe
This
I
is
do have
interesting.
the link. Okay. The link looked different. Let me see if this is it.
Okay, we'll see if it works. Otherwise, I have it queued up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is the
Yeah,
one you were
that-
wanting.
Okie dokie. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
This is Dr. Cameron Kyle Seidel, ER and critical care doctor from New York City. 9 days ago, I opened an intensive care unit to care for the sickest COVID-positive patients in this city. In these 9 days, I have seen things I have never seen before. In treating these patients, I have witnessed medical phenomenon that just don't make sense in the context of treating a disease that is supposed to be a viral pneumonia. 9 days ago, I presumed I was opening an intensive care unit to treat patients with a virus causing a pneumonia that was ravaging lungs across the world, starting out as something mild, a cough, a sore throat, and progressively increasing in severity until ultimately ending in something called acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS. This is the paradigm that every hospital in the country is working under. This is the disease, ARDS, that every hospital is preparing to treat. And this is the disease, ARDS, for which in the next 2 to 6 weeks, 100,000 Americans might be put on a ventilator. And yet, everything I've seen in the last 9 days, all the things that just don't make sense, the patients I'm seeing in front of me, the lungs I'm trying to improve, have led me to believe that COVID-19 is not this disease, and that we are operating under a medical paradigm that is untrue. In short, I believe we are treating the wrong disease, and I fear that this misguided treatment will lead to a tremendous amount of harm to a great number of people in a very short time. As New York City appears to be about 10 days ahead of the country, I feel compelled to get this information out. COVID-19 lung disease, as far as I can see, is not a pneumonia and should not be treated as one. Rather, it appears as if some kind of viral-induced disease, most resembling high-altitude sickness. It is as if tens of thousands of my fellow New Yorkers are on a plane at 30,000 feet and the cabin pressure is slowly being let out. These patients are slowly being starved of oxygen. I have seen patients dependent on oxygen take off their oxygen and quickly progress through a state of anxiety and emotional distress and eventually get blue in the face. And while they look like patients absolutely on the brink of death, they do not look like patients dying of pneumonia. I have never been a mountain climber, and I do not know the conditions at base camp below the highest peaks in the world. But I suspect that the patients I'm seeing in front of me look most like as if a person was dropped off on the top of Mount Everest without time to acclimate. I don't know the final answer of this disease, but I'm quite sure that a ventilator is not it. That is not to say that we don't need ventilators. We absolutely need them. They are the only way at this time that we're able to give a little more oxygen to patients who need it. But when we treat people with ARDS, we typically use ventilators to treat what's called respiratory failure. That is, we use the ventilator to do the work that the patient's muscles can no longer do because they're too tired to do it. These patients' muscles work fine. I fear that if we are using a false paradigm to treat a new disease, that the method that we program the ventilator, one based on a notion of respiratory failure as opposed to oxygen failure, that this method, and there are a great many number of methods we can use with the ventilator, but this method being widely adopted at this very moment in every hospital in the country, which aims to increase pressure on the lungs in order to open them up, is actually doing more harm than good. And that the pressure we are providing to lungs, we may be providing to lungs that cannot stand it, that cannot take it, and that the ARDS that we are seeing, that the whole world is seeing, may be nothing more than lung injury caused by the ventilator. Now, I don't know the final answer to this disease, I do sense that we will have to use ventilators. We will have to use a great many number of ventilators, and we need a great many number of ventilators. But I sense that we can use them in a much safer way, in a much safer method. That safer method challenges long-held dogmatic beliefs within the medical community and among lung specialists, which will not be easy to overcome. But I really believe that they must be overcome. There are hundreds of thousands of lungs in this country at risk, and the time to overcome them is now. I'm confident that if those of us that work bedside with these patients, those of us who are witnessing the things that we have never seen before, despite the many years we have worked and the thousands of patients and diseases we have seen, if we can effectively communicate this to all those that are so important but who are not bedside, the researchers, the administrators, those who procure our resources and make our protocols, the politicians, our own government, if we are able to convince them that this is a disease that is different than anything we have ever seen, I am confident that an answer can be found, that effective treatments can be discovered, and that a plan to disseminate that treatment can be rapidly deployed, and that tens of thousands and probably hundreds of thousands of lives and lungs will be protected. The time for this is now. We are staring into a future in which a great many of our fellow Americans are going to suffer, not to mention people all around the world. For those who will not suffer directly from this disease, from the terrible human cost of this disease, for those who will not lose a family member or a friend, and there will be a great many number of people who will lose those close to them. But for those who don't, they are still going to suffer from the great economic cost of COVID-19. We are all involved in this future. So I urge you, for those of us, if you are out there, for those who work bedside, I urge you to speak up. We can change this. I thank you all for listening. Please spread the message and stay safe.
Okay. So we bring it back round to the people who are directly on the front lines, who are experiencing and who are aiding and trying to assist. So we're going to leave it there. I hope that this has been interesting for you. I hope it's got you thinking. I hope it's got you, maybe you're going to not quite go to bed at the same time tonight because your insides are active, and all kinds of other questions are going to begin to arise for you, which you then have the extreme wonderful joy of being in a relationship with those questions. And hopefully you might choose next week, should you join us again, to share some of the questions that have come up for you based on what we've watched tonight. So next week, in the next webinar, we'll be looking at social challenges, the gradual disruptions in our social sense of well-being since 9/11, the development of what I call the open air concentration camp society, safety nets slashed, increased homelessness, wages flat since 1970s, managed healthcare, biotech, and big pharma have a controlled population experimenting going on these folks on multiple levels. Depression, desperation, mental health challenges as a result of long-term social isolation and social distancing, loss of contact with institutional knowledge and memory alive in our older population, texting, replacing the sound of our human voices and the resonance and the information that's carried in the resonance of our voices. A text voice is not a phone call. Damage in the form of long-term communication and human connection. And then we get into the practicalities of cell phone use, 5G radiation, and those will be the primary instruments for track, trace, and vaccinate. Okay, right? Yeah, anybody have any parting comments? I'm not trying to flatten you, I'm trying to flatten the curve using the up-down spinning particles knowledge and information, which we'll probably get into in the last webinar, but this is something that we can all really dive deep into. and take it with us as we move forward making our choices. You'll have lots to think about up-down particles and how you become the person who decides whether they same set spin in the same direction, which is deadly, or whether they do the natural spin, which is one up, one down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for sharing your time. Bye-bye.